They would fail because they never took the right action, because activity and the right activity leads to being productive. Number two, they didn't let themselves take action because they had foggy glasses. They didn't have clarity. We have a lot of people in different companies I've owned and people I've taught where they love it. They love the education part of it, but they'll never implement anything because they don't have crystal clear vision and they don't feel comfortable. The reasons why people fail is they never started, they didn't have a clear vision, or they didn't punch past the target, which is the third thing that we teach constantly is we always underestimate the amount of effort necessary to be successful.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Chris Moore. He's going to share how to experience surges of income. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. You think making money is hard? Well, it probably is for you then. But what if it was easy? What if it wasn't risky? Then what? That's our topic today. We're going to talk also about how to make surges of income and how to shift the way you look at doing that. Chris Moore is a property and acquisition investor, entrepreneur, full-stack digital marketer, business development consultant, and best-selling author. Chris has a strong background in business development, strategy, and scaling companies quickly. He scaled and built 2 companies, earning him 2 Inc. 5000 awards in the last few years and several other awards. Let's meet Chris and see how he does it. Welcome to Richer Soul, Chris Moore. It's great to have you join us today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm excited for the conversation. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Wow. Growing up, we grew up in a household where money was something we paid attention to because my dad was an entrepreneur. He had a painting contracting company and he also worked in sales. So it's something that we talked about a lot, but it wasn't the traditional education that I, looking back, wish I would have had, right? It wasn't something where we were able to discuss it a lot. I don't think necessarily either my father or my mom, either one, were really great with money, but it's a lot of things that I've learned from them through reflection. Really was my biggest moments. But yeah, growing up, we weren't rich. We weren't really poor. I knew what money was. I think the biggest thing with money as a kid is I knew how to make it myself. I got a rake and a lawnmower and a weed eater for Christmas one year. And I just started making my own money, paying for my own lunch. And that was probably my biggest lessons.
So what were some of those reflections then that happened later on with money?
Really just understanding, fast forward as a parent, my kids are 15 and 16 now. And I'm looking back at my childhood and the way that decisions were made around money, like when we would spend money, when we wouldn't. My dad, rest in peace, he passed away about 10 years ago. He was quite tight. He wouldn't spend a lot of money. He was a big saver. I think on my mom's side, she's never really been great with money, but she was great at making money. So just looking back as I experienced these moments as a parent and at owning businesses, and I try to think about what would they do or what did they do differently? And how can I learn from the good and from the bad? So that's kind of how I've been looking at it.
Because you've had so much success, are you worried about making sure your kids still have a desire to make money?
Yes. Yes. That is something that crosses my mind a lot. Like I look at my 15-year-old and she wakes up, she gets to look out her window and she's looking at a lake. We live on the water. And I constantly remind her, like, this is not normal. This isn't something that I grew up with. It's something that we can't take for granted. You're going to be living in a cheap apartment, eating ramen noodles at some point soon. And I think the level of ambition that my kids have is healthy. It's not as strong as what mine was at that age, but I grew up in a different world where I felt like if I wanted something, I had to go earn it. Right. So, yeah, that is a concern. It's something that we've been kind of focusing on a lot. But if you look at kind of your upbringing, in my world, I didn't really have the whole college path and you can do whatever you want. I'll support you in any direction. We didn't have a lot of those conversations. It wasn't that maybe it wasn't important, but it just didn't come up. I didn't even know I missed it. Right. So with my kids, it's a different world because we have been very successful. They can go in any direction they want. They know dad will support them. One of them wants to go to art school. The other one doesn't quite know what she wants, but that's okay. But we're trying to make sure that we've got to choose a path, and money's important. They both work. We own a bowling alley here locally, so they both have work there, and that's giving them some pocket money, and I think they're enjoying that. But yeah, it's something I think about a lot, and it doesn't keep me up at night, but it's definitely something I'm aware of.
Well, it's one of the concerns. What I have found is a lot of successful people became successful because of issues during childhood that caused grit, that caused the ability or desire to want to do something different, and that pushed them forward. And I've seen a lot with kids who grow up with everything, who aren't at least taught some of those things. They take a lot of these things for granted. And so your success leads to their failure, which isn't always good. And that's not saying that for you. I'm just saying in general, that seems to be an issue.
Yeah, I see that. And I talk to a lot of people about children, and it really comes down to they have to want something. Otherwise, I think in general, children are kind of lazy. And the other thing is with children is perspective. They have such limited perspective on what life is really about, on what it feels like to work hard, what it feels like to have it easy. Like they don't really understand the differences. And I think there's no shortcuts to just getting thrown to the wolves in your early 20s and having to figure it out. And I think for me, a lot of my growth came from my early 20s because that was a time where I had to make something happen. There was no safety net. It was me, wife, 2 kids by 23, no college degree. It's time to make something happen. And I could choose to be a statistic, or I could choose to put the pedal to the metal and figure it out. And that's where my growth came from. I think I had some fundamental and foundational levels of entrepreneurship and drive and ambition that came to me naturally, genetically, as well as kind of fostered as a child. It was really like my dad would come home with a stack of pink flyers, big stack from this big, and he would print them out at work. And it says, we trim palm trees, or we trim bushes, pressure washing. And that's how I prospected. I walk around handing out flyers in all the neighborhoods. So I got a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit from my mom and my dad, and they both nurtured that. And I look back at it, they never really pushed me towards college. They pushed me towards entrepreneurship, and I'm really grateful for it. So I'm trying to reflect on that and push my girls that direction as well, if they want to go that way. But yeah.
Everyone's different. You can't decide their path, but if they have a direction they're going, you can help and guide them through that direction and use their pulling to help them find their place. That's all.
Yeah.
It's a fine line back and forth of push and pull. So you get out, you're 23, couple kids, young, not a lot of money. What happened? How'd you make it happen?
Restaurant management. I mean, that was my first thing. So I went in the Navy and I ended up getting a medical discharge. When I got home, I met my wife, quick fast track to marriage, had 2 babies pretty quickly. And the only thing I knew besides, mowing yards and trimming bushes and things I did in high school was really working in restaurants. So I quickly worked my way into management at 21, ended up managing restaurants until about 25. Managed 11 different restaurants, helped open as a GM with 3 of them towards the end there. And that was fun. I learned a lot, having 1,500 employees by the time you're 25 years old, firing people, hiring people, going through hard times is really helpful. I mean, I learned more from the restaurant business than any other business. I also learned that I didn't want to be there. I mean, the other managers I was working with, not all of them, but quite a few of them they were having relations with some of the employees and the hostesses. People only are excited about taking smoke breaks, and the hours are terrible. I mean, you leave, your kids are asleep. You come home, your kids are asleep. So I learned a lot about what I don't want in life. I learned a lot about seeing people, and that's okay if you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and they're still waiting tables or working in the kitchen. I realized that's not what I want for my life. So it was a great perspective for me, but that's kind of how I made it. And then luckily, this was great. One day I actually hurt my back, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was actually training at a new restaurant, and they said, "Hey, if you can't come to work because you hurt yourself, you'll just have to start over training again in 6 weeks." And I said, "Well, I can't go without a job for 6 weeks because I got a wife and two kids." And my mom plucked me and put me into real estate school the next day. And 2 weeks later, I'm a licensed agent, and it's all downhill from there. It was amazing. So, those moments happen where you have a forced shift. So I was lucky enough to get that really powerful perspective, learn how to work with people, learn how to manage and really motivate employees, learn how to work with employees that are tough to work with, and go through hiring and firing. And I think I learned a lot of my communication and people skills through that. That led me to a lot of the success I've had now. But luckily, I didn't have to stay in there longer than 4 years.
I guess I was lucky. I worked in restaurants when I was 15 up to about maybe 20. So by the time I got out of college, I didn't have to deal with that. But even then, they told me, they're like, yeah, don't be in this business. It's like you said, it's long hours. And the reality is, even though the restaurant's busy, most of them aren't making money.
Yeah, trust me, being in acquisitions now, I see restaurants are something that we go like this to, like stay away. Yeah. They're tough businesses, man. We had restaurant, I thought it was cranking. We're doing like 120 grand a week, and come to the end of the year, we're in a business meeting, and it was an oyster house, Gulf seafood oyster house, and they make 6% margins total for the entire year. Right. And I was thinking, wow, now that I know what I know, I mean, at bulk, in volume, yes, you can make some money, but you're only a few errors away from being in the negative. So yeah, trust me, knowing what I know now, I'd never go back.
And I don't blame you. So you got involved in real estate, and then where did that lead you to?
Led me to a lot of places, really finding my true passion in two different focuses was through real estate. When I say real estate, just to define that, that's residential resale. So that's working with buyers and sellers, residential homes, right? Not commercial or anything like that. And I learned a couple things. One, I realized very quickly that I was not put on this earth to cold call or canvas. So I made a choice when I was sitting in this orientation. This man's on stage talking to us about how we have to get the phone book out and dial and all these things. I realized that the other option would have my phone ring off the hook and just be able to field leads. So I actually doubled down at that moment, made a decision to learn how to be a lead generation specialist, which I've made millions and millions of dollars from learning those skills. Fast forward to today. So I learned how to become an agent where my phone rang off the hook. Wrote 2 best-selling books on the topic back in 2013, 2014 to teach other people because they kept saying, how did you do that, right? So I learned that. The second thing I learned, which has been my life's mission, was teaching. Through that process, I got so good at selling real estate in the marketing side, I was brought on as a continuing education instructor. And those are 3-hour, boring, dredge through the mud classes. They're literally being monitored by the state. They have to follow the syllabus, right? Well, I ended up doing close to about 400 to 500 of those over the next 7 years. And I got really good at public speaking. I got really much better at communication, leveraging nonverbal communication when teaching. And that really taught me that my life's mission was to teach, guide, and train others. And I found so much joy in it that even though the money was not great, I just kept doing it. And then, fast forward today, lead generation, marketing, public speaking, and training and teaching people what I've learned. And I own 5 coaching companies. This is what I do. So I think those years, even outside of selling real estate, have been foundational. But I did do well. By the time I finished real estate, we stopped finally in March of 2023. I believe we shut down our team. We had 27 agents. We've done over 400 million in sales volume over the last 4 years. or 6 years, we've done very well. And I didn't sell after 2017. I didn't sell anymore, but it was good. And I got to learn a lot, and I got a lot of good connections through that process.
And it sounds what you've done throughout your whole time is get paid to learn,
That's it.
right?
It's exactly
all along. You're picking up the skills that are valuable no matter what you do. And then if you can stack them correctly, then you truly have the ability to make money.
And that's exactly it. To me, I learned that demand was really the biggest thing. Can you learn how to tap into demand that's already there? And that's where lead generation comes into play. And it's just the littlest tweaks that help you channel the demand towards you or your product or your company versus somebody else. And that's really been the cornerstone. People ask me all the time, all right, how do I do what I do at the volume of what I do? And I say, well, I do the same thing in every company every day, right? It's the same exact thing. So it's not multitasking or thrashing. And it's just the key core principles that I can share with you if you'd like. But that's kind of the whole focus is those right. I learned while I earned, and I was able to stack those skills continuously to the point where I didn't have to do them for other people. At some point, I was doing them for myself.
I would like you to share that. What are those little tweaks that you do that pulls demand to you?
Well, I think it starts with preparation, understanding just kind of the key principles of marketing and understanding that, number one, unless you're doing a Super Bowl commercial, you're not going to go out and create demand for something or your keyword or anything like that. You have to go out and figure out, what did people already wake up this morning wanting, right? I was really excited when I look back at it. I was blessed to start my marketing career essentially with SEO, search engine optimization. And I did it leveraging a real estate website I built. It was called tourhuntsville.com at the time. And it was all about how much traffic can I siphon to me of people who are looking to relocate to our area. And I got into SEO and really learned that process, not at a world renowned expert level, but learned it. And then from there, that's where my lead generation journey started. Then I realized, this is way before Facebook ads or anything got popular, is I could leverage social media and Facebook. And I realized that there's really two different types of leads out there and lead sources. There's scalable and there's non-scalable, right? For the non-scalable, those are search driven. There's only so many searches available in your area or in the US for a given set of keywords. Compared to scalable lead sources is ones where you can push the gas down and generate as many leads as you like, right? So I realized that SEO was too slow for me. And I know there's lots of demand. I had to learn essentially kind of like fishing, like what bait can I put in front of people that's going to get them to bite, right? And I learned about leveraging curiosity. I learned about leveraging lots of different strategies. And then, I've made a career doing it now. So if I had to sum it up into some just key principles, number one is relevancy. Relevance is the number one most powerful term in sales and marketing. People don't pay attention unless it's relevant to them. They don't give themselves permission to buy unless they feel like it's relevant to them and their situation and their timeline and what they want, right? So I got really good at creating relevance. When I'm speaking to somebody, I want them to feel like I'm almost Madame Cleo, like a psychic, and I know everything that's already going on in their head. And I'm able to position things so relevant to them that they want to move forward. They give themselves permission to move forward. They feel like someone actually understands their ambitions and what they're going through and their pains, right? So that would be number one, relevancy. Number two, I've learned over time is to test demand. Don't just assume it's there. Always go out and test, and don't waste and piss away a lot of money trying new things, especially in lead generation and marketing and businesses. But make sure that it's been tested and you're predicting success, which is number three. Have the ability. So when you do something, predict success because you know there's demand. You've tested it. You understand. You've done your research. You know who the customer is. You know the customer avatar. You know what their pain points are. And you know how to speak to them in a way that it feels relevant. So those are my three things.
It's funny because when I talk to business owners, they don't take the time to define those things. They're just like, hey, this is what I have to sell. Let's put up an ad. I'm like, yeah, but no one's going to buy just because you sent an ad. You've
Correct.
actually got to talk to their pain points and model it in a way that they are attracted to it. Some markets are a lot easier than others. Some are very difficult and some are very noisy. And if you don't understand the game of sales, I think it's difficult. And it doesn't matter what you do, right? Because you own a restaurant, you're still in the sales game. You need to get people in the door. You work for a company, even an attorney or a doctor is in a sales game. They need to get clients. They need to get patients. So it really doesn't matter what you're doing. Understanding these principles are what are going to get you ahead in life. It's what I call a universal principle.
Yeah, go to the E-Myth, right? Michael Gerber states that 96% of businesses fail over a 10-year period. And a lot of the reasons they fail is because people go into businesses to solve problems that only they think exist, right? There's a lot of other people who build tools or solutions to problems no one cares about. There's people who go in and they ride a fad or a timeline and they can't adapt to stay relevant, right? There's all these reasons why these businesses fail. That's why we've always been so focused on teaching people how to buy the 4% that survive, right? Because starting a business is very risky. Although I've started many that have worked, I've started a couple that haven't. But I think that's the key, what you're saying. Like when you talk to a business owner, they don't understand at a comprehensive level everything it takes to be successful in business. And that's what Michael Gerber also talks about, right? They talk about the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. A lot of businesses are started by gifted technicians who either go out and branch out on their own and they grow their business organically, very slowly. And there's a lot of transfer value issues there, which allows them to never be able to quit the job that they own. And that's where a lot of businesses start, right? Or you look at things like HGTV or Food Network, which is just ruining a whole industry like food and real estate, where everyone thinks they can flip houses. Everyone thinks they should own a restaurant because they're passionate about it. And they know nothing about menu engineering. They know nothing about food costs. They know nothing about food safety. And they just go pour their life savings into one project and piss it all away. And we see that every single day, right? So I think financial literacy is hugely important, as well as just understanding business literacy and understanding perceived versus actual risk around, how can someone have the ability to predict success when going into a business venture. So I'm passionate about teaching that. As you can see, I talk about this every day, and I think more people need to hear it.
I was going to save this for later, but I think now is the perfect time to bring it up. When I think of E-Myth, I love EOS. Because it's the same kind of concept of systematizing what you do. Mm-hmm. And then on the financial side, we love Profit First, because what it does is it systematizes the movement of money. And you get an immediate reaction. Is my business profitable? You went into business to be profitable. And what happens with too many business owners is they all want to keep reinvesting.
Yep.
But they never actually define a return on that investment. Right. So they're not really reinvesting. They're wasting money on their business, hoping their dream will come true. I know you're a fan of both of those systems.
I am. Yeah. And for different reasons, right? Before I tell you about why I like them, let me go back to what you just said a second ago. We've done an independent study inside of our company, because we work in business acquisitions, where we studied the average retiring baby boomer age business owner. Where have they been focusing their investments over the last 30, 40 years? What do they have in non-real estate, non-primary home equity? And what are they considering to be their retirement? And it's actually quite scary. The average baby boomer business owner who's owned a company for more than 20 years has less than $202,000 in traditional retirement savings outside their home's equity. And they've been banking on this entire time, reinvesting into their one thing that's going to make them all their money, which is their business. Yet they have no clue that they're not setting themselves up for sale. And they're not going to be able to sell it, because only 1 in 11 businesses that go on the open market in the US actually sells. Only 1 in 11, which is crazy, under $10 million in revenue, right? But yeah, and I think that's why I like EOS and Profit First, because there's been a long time, and I'm only 39. I'm not an older guy. I'm still a young man. I know I've been going at it hard since I was 18, but there's not always been a blueprint or an operating system. And there's so many people, especially in some of the industries I've worked in, like marketing agencies, where they don't know what's going on. They got good at doing something. They picked up a couple clients. They figured out how to pick up a couple more, and all of a sudden they have a business, right? But when is it appropriate to pay yourself? How much should you pay yourself? Should you be putting 50% of your profits towards something specific? How does it work with partnerships and business distributions and the operating agreement? And then on the EOS side, most people who own businesses and start businesses are what Gino Wickman would call a visionary. And these people can't even help themselves. They can't execute to save their lives, right? So I think giving somebody who's got this beautiful vision and unbelievable amount of drive, ambition, and eloquency, and they're so amazing, you don't give them an integrator, they're going to be absolutely worthless. So I like both of those systems a lot because it finally gives somebody who's never been taught any of this stuff before, and they're not going to be, not often in traditional college, more maybe doing like an MBA, but no one's coming in and saying, hey, you found some success, usually solopreneurs who are building their way into a bigger business. Now let's make sure that you're preparing yourself correctly for exit from day one. Let's making sure you're not going to get burned out, and let's make sure you have the right team in place and the right people in the right seat. Like, so that's why I like them. I think we share that opinion. But I think why I like it the most is because I appreciate it, because I've seen so many people fail. And I know that if these things were in place, if they would have read these books and actually put them into practice earlier or at all, maybe they would be in a different position.
And I agree with you. I have an MBA. They didn't teach us any of that. And that is the problem. They didn't teach us anything really of value that would help you run and grow a small business. And actually, it's funny because when you go through your MBA, there's always case studies. And all the famous case studies are the people who got F's or C's on their MBA papers for their business idea. And it's like, well, oh, after they succeeded, you want to learn about this in college? And so I just find it kind of hilarious. And these days, entrepreneurship has gotten very popular. And kids are going to college for entrepreneurship. I'm like, are you out of your mind? You're going to spend $200,000? Go buy a business. Go start a business. You'll learn a lot more in those 4 years, and you'll make money, and you won't be broke on graduation. So I just think it's much better to go that direction.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Looking back at it, I did have 5 years of college. I started later. I didn't actually graduate because I shifted majors, and one of the colleges I went to went out of business, and I lost all my credits, but just part of the game. But if I look at everything, all I was doing was pursuing a piece of paper, and I was pursuing maybe the title or the accomplishment because I love accomplishments. But at the end of the day, are they really teaching anything that's going to be very, very worthwhile in the business world? And I think there is some value to college, and I think colleges are starting to wake up for sure. I look at Carl, my business partner. He just moved to Texas, right? So his son is 16 years old. And I said to him in the car, he's British, and he just moved there from England. And I said, what are you studying? 3 of his classes are entrepreneurship, social media, and paid ads in high school. So I think the world's waking up, which is a beautiful thing to see. We live out in the middle of nowhere, Alabama. So my girls in high school don't have cool classes like that. But I do think there's hope, and I feel good about it. But I do think at the end of the day, as adults or as parents, we got to sit down and try to help our children figure out what path they want to go on, because just defaulting to college is not going to serve all of them. So I think it's an interesting topic for sure.
My son's into robotics.
Mm-hmm.
And what we learned when he was doing robotics in high school as a club, not in a classroom, was when we visited the colleges, they were behind. So even though a school might teach social media marketing, they're probably teaching what worked 4 years ago, not what's working today.
Yeah.
And you're not understanding, I don't think that they're understanding the craft of how to actually do it, which once you start doing it, you're like, oh, I know this is going to work. And you put a couple bucks behind it and you fail. You're like, oh, why didn't that work? And that's what you learn through all of that is testing, failing, trying, starting to discern what does work and what doesn't. One of the things, though, you talk about is surges of income. I think too often we're taught that income comes in this like slow, steady upward state. But in reality, income comes in surges at time. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, and I wish I was the one who originally coined that phrase. I remember the moment I was reading a book by Grant Cardone, and it's called The Millionaire Booklet. And it was just this 55-minute book of him, just kind of almost like a podcast episode. And he said something that was so impactful that it's always stuck with me. And I've really focused on it quite a bit ever since. And he said, people never get rich on income. They get rich from surges of income. And if you stop and think about it, what you said a moment ago is dead on correct. No matter how much more money you make on your normal monthly recurring income or from your job or whatever, you're always going to have lifestyle creep. You're going to spend more money. Inflation, as we saw in double digits last year, as cost of living increases, like you're never going to earn your way in normal income to wealth, right? You may feel like you can combat that with like the millionaire next door, and a certain number of the millionaires are all people who've worked for a long time, but that's from their IRAs and their 401ks. It's not from how much money they're making, right? But there's this concept of why don't we chase, instead of more income every year, why don't we chase surges of income, right? So I figured out there's really 4 easy ways to talk about how to make surges of income. So I teach this to all my students, and that's really through things that I've been focusing on for the last 20 years, kind of almost accidentally, but really, the sale of an asset, whether it's a real estate property or a business, there's a liquidation event. It could be an IPO. It could be all kinds of things. It could be business profit distributions, right? So owning businesses and beyond what you're getting paid, also having that income coming in from the business profits. And then the fourth one is really learning how to do launches and do live events and things where you can make large amounts of money all in one place, right? I remember reading that book, and Grant says, I remember the moment where I made $1 million in a year for the first time, right? He said, then I remember that moment I made $1 million in a month. And then I remember the moment when I made $1 million in a week. And then I made $1 million in a day. And then I made $1 million in an hour when he was on, I think, ClickFunnels stage, right? And it's so amazing where you can condense these large amounts of money that are above and beyond your normal paycheck. They're not pre-allocated towards expenses. And you can make a choice at that moment when you learn how to tap into this and put it towards things that are going to grow your net worth, right? So that's what surges of income is. It's really money above and beyond your normal paycheck or monthly recurring income that's created in these surges where you can push it directly towards your net worth. So all the money that I'm technically worth, my net worth, has all come from surges of income. But the other side of that coin, obviously, is willpower and discipline, not to just go, piss it away at Vegas, but instead, systematically and very strategically putting it away and investing in different asset classes. So for me, my drug of choice is long-term rentals. I'm a real estate guy for a long time, so I love long-term rentals. I love appreciation. Don't really care much about the cash flow. I don't really reinvest into businesses very often. I'm not actually taking my own money and buying businesses with it because we buy them for free. But I'm mostly in long-term rentals and some other traditional investments, the S&P. But yeah, that's what surges of income is. And it's something that's so easy to understand and it seems intuitive, but you have to be very intentional with your focus to be able to pursue that. And I think there's very specific skill sets you can learn that lend towards this and can help you achieve that. When the average person says that sounds great, I'm not good at any of those things, there is a path to learn it.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. It's funny you talk about real estate. Forever, I used to listen to Dave Ramsey. Mm-hmm. Dave Ramsey's like, yeah, you go buy rental real estate for cash. And I could never figure out how Dave Ramsey would buy his rental real estate for cash until one day it dawned on me. He's got a business. The business throws off extra income. He takes the income from the business and reinvests it in real estate. He never told anyone that. He told everyone you go buy real estate for cash, but he never told them how. You got to have a business that generates surges of income that you can go buy a house for.
Yeah, because you look at the average American, like the idea of coming up with a 20 to 25% down payment for a rental property is just crazy. right? And they're not going to be able to save their way up because that little nest egg emergency fund just gets depleted again and again, especially as cost of living goes up. So I think to get ahead, you have to learn how to do these type of things, really. Dave Ramsey's a funny one for me, right? He teaches something very specific that's very powerful for his audience. It'll ruin everybody else who follows the advice if they don't need it. But he's also probably not always practicing what he preaches because he's also a multi-millionaire, right? And the way that he's living and investing is not designed for the people he's teaching. So, but yeah, that's really it. And when you get into real estate, like buying it cash, I don't think that's very smart. Cash is not very expensive to do debt. But it comes down to, if you study real estate investing, we actually own a real estate investing coaching company now too. I really like this stuff. Is you can be an appreciation investor where you're not worried about cash flow and you're leveraging debt and mortgages, and you're just trying to get as many horses in the race strategically in the right areas with good schools where properties are going to appreciate. And it's like having a savings account that keeps paying you and somebody else pays your mortgage. The other people are cash flow investors who are doing more DSCR loans, buying multifamily, commercial, or they're buying, for lack of better terms, slums that they can get 2% return per month on their money. And there's no appreciation in the slums. DSCR type properties and multifamily only makes money if their rent roll goes up. So it's not as much of an appreciation game. So you just got to choose which path you want to go. I'm an appreciation investor. Spending cash on that makes no sense. No sense.
And that's fine. Everyone's got to figure out the path for them. There is no perfect path. There's the path that works with your skills, your market, and what you're willing to do.
Yep.
You said something that kind of just slipped by, and I want to go back and explore it. How do you make money with little risk?
Yep. Well, I think step one is, I think the way we're taught in our world today, we don't even understand what risk is. Really, you have perceived risk and you have actual risk, right? When we think something's risky, it doesn't mean it's risky. It just seems risky from your perspective, or there's certain parameters that are not in place that would make you feel more comfortable, right? So when I think about the concept of risk or being able to make money with very little risk, it comes down to two things. One, having the ability to predict success. Because when you can predict you're going to be successful, you're prepared, you've done your research, you're going into battles you can win. Babe Ruth only swung at pitches he knew he was going to knock out of the park. The Red Baron, the fighter pilot, most famous fighter pilot in history, has never lost because he's never gone into a fight that he knew he was going to not win, right? He's always predicting he's going to win. So number one, less risk is doing the right work up front, having the right skill sets, being prepared so you can predict success. But number two, it comes down to what happens if this doesn't work, right? And almost like that prenup in business, being able to plan to fail. And if you fail, you win, right? And it's a whole different paradigm shift around how to tackle something new. And I think that's the key to being able to do things with no risk, right? We talk about all the time in life, we're defined by what we say no to. We're not defined by what we say yes to, right? I think the yes man, the yes woman attitude is terrible. First of all, you only have so much bandwidth. You only have so much brain power. And if you start saying yes to things where you cannot predict that you're going to be successful in a business venture where there's real money on the line or real time consideration, that's where people fail and get gun shy, or they say, "Oh, that's too risky," right? Where I don't think it has to be that way if you know what you're doing. So when I say perceive risk, I mean like people are perceiving doing something as risky compared to actual risk is like the idea of falling off a cliff and dying, or walking into a bear cave and getting eaten. That's real risk. And we don't know the difference in our mind. Our mind has no difference. They just see cause and effect. This scares me, causes something called subconscious reluctance, which we can't fight unless you know about it. And I teach that too. We don't have to get into all that stuff. But so when it goes back to the very end, like the beginning, how do you make money with a lot less risk? Number one, I like to do something called consulting for equity, where I go in and solve bleeding problems for business owners, things that they really need solved that's going to have huge implications. And I structure it in a way where I'm their partner. I get paid from day one. It doesn't cost me a dime. I also have profit interest or a phantom equity where I get upside as well. I'm not going to do something and grow somebody else's business without also getting upside. So it comes down to choosing your shots. Like I say no a lot. I get these offers every day of someone, "Hey, can you come in and work with me? I'll make you my partner." And I teach it, so I get a lot more attention than the average person. But there are ways for you to do what you do best and reposition yourself correctly to no longer have to be hired or work for someone as an employee, but you can do it as a partner in a business. So that's one of the ways. Other ways is learning how to rent cash flow. We also teach this in our Dealmaker Wealth Society business acquisition company, where you can buy a business using a leverage buyout. There's a lot of different ways to do that, where you're walking into something that's already cash flowing, and you can do it with somebody else's money, very little money out of your pocket, and be able to walk into like literally cash distributions every month. And that's lower risk as well. There's lots of ways. So I don't want to get down a rabbit hole here, but hopefully it answers your question.
It does. I think you have to figure out, well, part of that is learning to say no, right?
Mm-hmm. Huge.
Because I think too often we always think, oh, this is the one opportunity I have. And that's not true. We have many, many opportunities if we go looking for them. And so it's controlling our emotions in those particular situations. It's also how to, what you're talking about, structure the deal, structure the opportunity, structure it so that you actually do well. Now, I will say right now, buying businesses is hot in the sense that everybody's talking about it. But I work with business owners all the time. Running a business is not so easy. Kind of like going back to your restaurant days, right? You're dealing with all of those people. So, like, if you're going to go in and buy this business, how do you make sure that it's not a difficult business for you?
It's a great question. I think it goes back to kind of what are you hoping buying a business is going to do for you, right? There are people who are excited about being passionate owner operators, and they want to jump in and be there every single day and do what they love. And that's okay. The rest of us, most everybody else, wants some level of hybrid where some involvement strategically, but they want to be more passive and owner investor, right? So to do that, number one, yeah, there are a lot of people talking about buying businesses for sure. My partner, Carl, is the original. He's the first guy to ever teach this online. And what we've been teaching has never wavered. It's not about buying something that's easy to buy. It's about buying the right business that has cash flow. And that's where everything comes in place. So there's a sweet spot between 1 million and 10 million in revenue for most businesses for acquisitions. And why this is such a sweet spot is below 1 million in revenue, you're buying a job from the seller most of the time. They're lacking a lot of systems and processes, usually have antiquated systems, lots of transfer of value issues, which I can explain in a minute. And you're buying somebody else's headache compared to usually between that 1 and 10 million. You have a lot of really good things in place. So you have sales, marketing, operations, F's like the financials, everything's separated. You have middle management layers that are more apt to be running the business more in the day-to-day. Yes, sometimes the owner is still wearing one of those hats, maybe multiple, but they have a lot better systems and processes and premises and reputation and people. And you're not buying something that's heavily like leveraging the owner to be successful, right? So that's why you see like private equity, PE won't touch anything usually under a ceiling. And it's starting to lower a little bit in some industries like electrical contracting companies. They're going down to even as low as 3 million in revenue before, where they would only be in that 10 million and up because they're not prepared to transfer and integrate and own a company that needs all these people that it doesn't have, right? So buying a business that already has people and processes and premises and reputation, middle management layers in place. They already understand customer acquisition. They've already figured something out. They've stood the tale of time. Being in business over 5 to 10 years is great. That's where you can buy a business with a lot less risk because you can predict success. You can go in and you're not going to have to jump in and figure out tons of stuff. There are people out there and great coaches that teach these $1 business acquisitions, and you can do a turnaround and make all this sunk equity. But that's also a pain in the butt. Like you said, businesses are not that easy to run. And actually, a lot of people who come to us are not people who already own a business because a lot of times they're too overwhelmed. The idea of growing through acquisition is a very overwhelming thought. They say, I don't know what the heck to do with what I have. I'm already stressed out, right? But there's a level beyond that. And if you do things like leverage EOS and profit first, you can get to that next level where you can get away from being the technician or the manager or the entrepreneur, and you can be the investor, right? And you can be to the point where you can grow the business through acquisition. So, but it comes back to the beginning, like what do you want out of buying a business? And that's where it kind of comes into play. It's different for everybody.
And a lot of people don't answer that question. what do you want? They don't know what they want.
They don't
They don't
know.
know how much is enough.
Yep.
And they don't know what they want. And until you define that for yourself on your values, I think we're stuck there. So you talk about transfer of value. You want to kind of bring that out a little bit further?
I will. One thing you said a second ago, if I can touch on that, is we
Yeah.
talked about it earlier quite a bit in relevancy, right? One of my, I guess, claims to fame in business is my ability to grow companies, right? I have some Inc. 5000s. I've got some growth awards over there. And the reason why I've been able to do that is exactly what you just said. If someone has glasses on and they're very, very blurry, right? They've got stuff all over it. They can't see clearly what they should be doing. The human psyche is really designed to not let you move forward. You don't feel confident moving forward. You don't feel like this is a direction you should be going in. There's all these excuses. And what you just said a second ago is like, what do I want a business to do for me? Why would I want to buy a business? One of the things that I do in my organizations and on the sales and marketing side, and I teach this, is how to have those moments where you show your prospect with such crystal clear vision, give them that vision, give them that clarity so they can give themselves permission to move forward. So I think a lot of our success in my organizations have come from that ability and that skill. So I just want to touch on that because you mentioned that. And that's a huge thing. A confused mind doesn't buy. A mind where they feel like if they take a step forward, they're in uncharted territory. They don't buy, right? So let's go back to transfer of value. This is really Carl's big focus. Carl Allen's my business partner, Dealmaker Well Society. And no one really talks about at the level he talks about because they don't have his perspective around the ways businesses are truly valuated, right? It's not just spreadsheets. It's not just taking the total profit and then looking at breaking it down to the EBITDA and figuring out a multiple. And that's not how it all works. That's part of it, right? But there's also something called transfer of value inside of the 4 pillars of valuation that he teaches constantly. And transfer of value is really like, what does that business look like when you own it, right? Are the customer relationships safe where the owner can walk away and they're not going to have any issues, right? Is there a customer concentration issue that leaves it very vulnerable and the bank's very nervous about financing it? What else is there? Is the owner really the business? Is it the fact that they don't have customer acquisition and marketing dialed in and they're bragging to you like it's a good thing? The fact that they never had to market, they grow from word of mouth. It's just so great. Like that's terrible. Like how easy is the value that this business owner has in their business transferable to the new owner? That's what transfer value is. And it's a very powerful thing. And when you get to acquisitions and you go to get an SBA loan or get an investor or an angel investor or some sort of equity investor, anything, they look at these things because they're trying to predict that you'll be successful. And it's not always what you can control, which dictates that. So it's really looking at, and we have models all around this stuff on how to actually give real transfer value scores to see, is this even something that can transfer? Just like if you were scaling or looking at a business as a consultant and you would say, yes, this is best in class versus lacking, right? We can actually dial that in and compute that. And it's very powerful.
It's a lot of what you talk about sounds similar to what Alex Hormozy's doing. Is it, or are you vastly different, or are you just same but different? Or
yeah, so Hormozy is one of my big inspirations.
Okay.
I don't think what he talks about is something that's relevant to everybody. I wouldn't go to him for advice. A lot of the stuff I hear him say, like, hey, do this, is not smart. When it comes to business, he's brilliant. We were successful in teaching this before he was on the map. What he's doing, if I can give it a word and a term for you, is he's doing a lot of consulting for equity, essentially, as well as he's also buying equity stakes in businesses where he can predict he can grow them, right? So if you go to acquisition.com, his website, he gives away all of his training for free. And because he even says selfishly, I want companies over 3 million in revenue in these industries to call me. I want to give you cash, buy equity in your company, plug in my teams, and we'll take you to the moon and we'll sell you. So no, we don't do the same thing. He's growing his net worth and his portfolio through acquisitions. He has a very specific buy box. He's one of them that's doing it very well. I'm not going to name the names. There's 3 other people who are very prominent figures in our industry doing the same thing, but they only do it for free, just consulting for equity. They won't pay you a dime. You should actually thank them for taking equity in your company. And they haven't had a very good track record. Alex Hermosi has done well because he has a very specific buy box, is what we call it, and he's a man of integrity, right? So from what I understand, I don't know him real well, but so no, we're not doing the same things. He's doing the things that we teach, and he's doing it at a very high level.
And I think that's important. Is I always love to learn, but I also realize that if I don't implement and if I don't put the depth of work in that they want you to do and essentially do the homework, unlike high school where your homework's useless, the homework is actually doing kind of what you did, is learning the skills, honing the skills, and then creating all of the materials. Again, even all of the systems we talked about, EOS, eMyth, all those things require you to do work. At the end of the day, a lot of us may not like that kind of work, but if you don't do it, you're not going to get the benefits and reap the rewards compared to those who do. And what Alex has done sounds like is done his homework and done the work and followed the systems that have been proven, much like you teach. And then you have to do the work. So out of curiosity, I mean, I know you've taught a lot of people. I'm assuming they're not all successful, right? What determines a student's success versus mediocrity or non-success?
Well, I think it depends on what level of student too, right? So in the coaching industry, there's really a few different levels of student. There's somebody who buys a self-consumption course or buys a book or buys even a higher price point course that's very in depth. But when you look at studies, there's only 10% actual consumption on data
Mm-hmm.
that people buy, right? Even people who go to Udemy or lynda.com and they buy or a master class, only 10% of people actually consume and actually finish it, right? And it's interesting. A lot of these companies have made tons of money hand over fist, kind of with the Netflix model where they buy it because they're in this moment. They have this ambition right now, but then it fades quickly, right? So what I would say is with those type of students, we have no control over their success besides setting them up for success from the beginning. But we actually, in our types of business, we use that as a weeding mechanism. We like to deal with people who are willing to buy our lower ticket products because we know they're serious. Somebody's got some more skin in the game and they're showing a level of intent. Where we want to track our track record much better is when we're mentoring people, right? When someone signs up for a 12-month term program or a lifetime access program where they're actually saying, not only are we giving you the primary promise of we're going to teach you how to do these things, but we're going to do it with you, or we're going to give you accountability and we're going to have an open feedback loop so you can get real-time feedback, and we're going to put you into teams, and we're going to meet with you regularly, and we're going to have regular Zoom meetings that are focused. Like when you get into that level of mentorship, there's only a couple of things, reasons why someone would fail, right? They would fail because they never took the right action, because activity and the right activity leads to being productive. Number two, they didn't let themselves take action because they had foggy glasses. They didn't have clarity. We have a lot of people in different companies I've owned and people I've taught where they love it. They love the education part of it, but they'll never implement anything because they don't have crystal clear vision and they don't feel comfortable, right? Other people just have a reluctance inside to say, I can't do anything until I know everything because I'm afraid to look like an idiot. I'm afraid to look stupid, right? So the reasons why people fail is they never started, they didn't have a clear vision, or they didn't punch past the target, which is the third thing that we teach constantly is we always underestimate the amount of effort necessary to be successful. Another Grant Cardone quote from 10X rule, right? People underestimate the amount of effort necessary to be successful. Bruce Lee talks about the concept of punching through the head, punching past the target. And that's a big part of it. A lot of people, they try to do something, but they're such in the shallow end of the pool. They try so little that when they don't get the result they instantly think they deserve and expect, they give up, right? So like any type of business, you have prospecting and you have customers. Like you have to prospect like crazy, having the right expectations that maybe you'll have a 10% conversion rate. If I want to get 20 new customers, I need to go get 500 new leads, punch way past the target, predict that I'm going to be successful. So yeah, so our track record, 100%, not everyone's successful. Absolutely not. The people who show up, who decide to play full out, who have the right expectations, the people who also want it. If you don't want it, or it's not that big of a priority in your life, you'll never put in the work, right? So as a company, our biggest goal, besides seeing people successful, is try to find the people who are most likely to be in the right position. We know that if someone's runway is 3 months, do or die, I've got to make this work, or I've got to go back to corporate. They shouldn't join a 1-year program where they feel like they have to be successful in 3 months. So part of our world is we want to pull that out during the sales process, because we're not setting them up for success in that case. So yeah, if I could give you an exact answer, I know thousands of deals have closed through our program. Thousands. It's insane. We had over 300 consulting for equity deals just last year. When we started to focus on it, we've been doing it this whole time. We just didn't call it what it is. But it's the 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle. 20% of the students do 80% of the success. And that's how I think it's going to always work that way. But what we can do is we can lead a horse to water.
Hey, and I just want to be clear. I wasn't trying to say your things don't work or your students do. It's like, what are the characteristics of the students?
Yeah. I didn't
bring about. No, I just, and it's funny because I've learned certain psychological tricks. You're like, hey, on a scale of 10, how likely do you want to do this? And if they say anything less than 10, maybe 9.5, we just move on. There's not the commitment to do it.
Yeah.
And then, I see it with Tony Robbins would always say, oh, I tried that and it failed. Well, what did you try? I tried this one thing. You tried one thing? Did you try 5 others? Well, no. It's like, you got to try 100 things.
Yep.
Trying one thing and saying you failed, it's not going to work, isn't going to cut it. And I think the one I love best, though, is Marshall Goldsmith, who's what got you here won't get you there. One of his students finally came to him and said, you know what? I figured out how you're so successful. You're a scam. And he's like, what do you mean? He goes, you will not pick and work and coach anyone who you don't think is already going to succeed. You won't take on the person who doesn't already have the characteristics of success. And so if you've already picked people who are naturally going to succeed, because they are, as you said, they've got the commitment, they've shown it, they're willing to do the work, then you're guaranteed success. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. This stuff is hard.
It is hard. And I'll tell you, so being conditioned to being in hard environments is a big part of it. So we love athletes. We love military. We love teachers. We like people who have done very difficult business sales jobs, like selling life insurance and canvassing for solar and selling security systems, right? We like people who we know have grit. What else we like is we like parents. We like people who have a reason, especially with young kids, a reason to get up and work every day. We love single moms, people that failure is not an option. So there are characteristics that do really well. Carl talks about the best deal makers are always women because they listen and they actually follow instructions. And he said the second best deal makers are athletes and military because, they're good with following a process. They don't always try to challenge everything you say. They're good with following a leader's orders, and they tend to execute at a higher level. So yeah, definitely a lot of characteristics. We have quite a few companies, and one of the ones we purchased is a sales training, management, and recruiting firm, right? And I train salespeople a lot. And I find that, once again, the best salespeople are people who can get punched in the nose and keep moving. They're soldiers, they're military, they're athletes, they're people who are okay with some tough love and having tough conversations. And I think that is something that if we could attract more of those people, that would be ideal. We love working with them.
What's a group you didn't mention, and I don't know if you've noticed it?
What's that?
Mormons. Because they
Yep.
send their kids out at 18 to go canvas for 2 years. You got to go sell and get a lot of doors shut in your face.
Yeah, and they have unbelievable amounts of discipline as well. So interesting parallel there, right? I live outside of it now, but I lived in Huntsville, Alabama, right? And there's a college there that's a Seventh-day Adventist college. It's one of the biggest hubs in the nation for them. And I owned a Ninja Warrior gym, still own it. And it's down the street from that college. All of my coaches came from that college, from those college kids. And every single one of them was so dialed in, so disciplined, great work ethic, great attitude. And same thing. Yeah, some of these religions and the religious communities also produce, you're right. And Mormons the same way.
Pretty interesting.
It is. It is.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Wow. My secret to living an abundant life is to not let stress dictate how I feel. For me, my father passed away 10 years ago, and I believe stress played a big part of it. And I just decided not to let that happen. So I've tried to engineer my life around knowing the things that really stress me out and just eliminating them from my life. And that allows me to try to be the best self and the best version of myself for everyone in my life without having to deal with that on the side.
Elimination is one, or barriers are two. Like putting somebody between you and the problem. Like,
Yep.
you go fix this because you like fixing that. I don't. Get it out of my way.
Yeah. I have block and tacklers too, for sure.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
It's a great question. Hang out with the people you want to be in 10 years. I didn't learn that till I was 28. And I realized that as I look around and see who I'm with, there is a ceiling to how much I can achieve. And the moment that I started to upgrade the company I keep, I ended up skyrocketing and really finding momentum in life.
I'll give you the second half of that. If you're hanging out with the people who are 10 years ahead of you and you don't like the life they're living, you're going to have to go a different direction. Because I think a lot of times people working in companies and they go, oh, I want to get to the top. And they look at the people at the top and they're like, they're all miserable.
Yeah.
Don't follow them.
Yeah.
Make sure it's where you want to go.
I had a buddy do that. And then he realized this position that he had been pining over for 10 years, all of them were dying of heart attacks. And he realized that wasn't the right. Luckily, I chose the right way from the beginning. So it's been good.
That's key.
Yeah.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Perspective. Our perspective is our reality. And at this moment at 18, you just have to be humble enough to know that you don't know everything yet. So your goal over the next 5 years is to experience. You need to try everything and identify when you have that feedback loop of, ooh, I like this. What fills your cup if you want to leverage the 5 love languages book there. But you're looking for that feedback loop and you're trying to figure out what you like in life and what you don't like. And don't just pick a path without learning more about what it could look like. Some people find their true passion when they're 5 years old. Some people don't ever find it in their life. So if I was doing anything at 18 over again, I'd be searching for my passion so I can enjoy it longer.
And that also changes over time.
It does.
But, the skills you learn, as long as they're universal, will follow you wherever you go. So you might fail at something, but the lessons learned can then propel you forward. And that's really the key.
My stepdad gave me some advice at 18. He said, you either can go find what you love, turn it into a job, and never work a day in your life, which is bullshit. He said, or you can go learn a skill that pays a lot of money. So on your off time, you can do things that you love. He said, you can make the choice.
You can. I think you can find a job you love, but you've got to learn not to turn it into something that you no longer love. That's all.
And I've been there 4 times. Like Ninja Warrior was everything for me. I was on the show and it's great until you break your hand in half and you can't do it anymore. You kind of fall out of love with it. So choose something bigger than just your body as well.
Well, yeah, that's a longevity thing. Certain things just will not take you throughout life just because.
Yeah.
And certain things will grow with you throughout life and they will always compound. So pick wisely.
We talk about the destination is what everyone shoots for when the journey is what people should be focused on because the destination is not guaranteed, as well as the average person changes destinations constantly because as you have new perspective, you have new feedback and you know new things and you've tried things and you have to be comfortable with pivoting at some level. So yeah, I agree.
If people would like to continue to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram or YouTube. It's the easiest way. You can always send me a DM. And it's at Chris Moore Speaks on both of those platforms.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Did your view on how to grow wealth, make money, and have surges of income shift? Do you see the value in building your sales skills no matter what you do? It's a universal skill. It's going to take you far in life, and that's the key. What are the skills that allow us to live life on our terms, make money, and have fun? Because at the end of the day, that is what it should be about. Do you know someone who might enjoy this episode? Would you do me a favor and would you share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Next week, we've got Paul Ollinger, and he's going to talk about being reasonably happy. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.